Yeah, I'm getting my notes together here.
All right, well, let's go ahead and bring this meeting to order. First of all, we just want to remind everyone that tonight is election night, and so we have a little bit of a short agenda, and we certainly want to wish everyone the best of luck for tonight's results. And I think about 9 o'clock is when we'd be expecting them in, perhaps. Maybe. I think that's typical. Maybe I should be asking Commissioner Amiggs, what's the typical average time that results come in?
9 o'clock.
Okay, 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock. So we wish everyone the best of luck, and we're looking forward to seeing who we're going to be working with. All right, so let's go into our agenda. First up, we've got proclamations. Number one, we're going to proclaim Wednesday as Indian Leader Day. That's tomorrow. Do we have any representatives? Come on up to the microphone and sign in and tell us all about it.
Let's see.
Well, we'd like to thank you for acknowledging us today. The Indian Leader is the world's oldest American Indian student newspaper, and we're celebrating 120 years of publication here at Haskell Indian Nations University.
Excellent, 120 years, that's great. All right, well, I'll go ahead and read the proclamation. We'll be clapping again after the proclamation is read, too. We'll clap twice. Whereas the Indian Leader is the world's oldest Native American student newspaper, currently serving the students, staff, faculty, alumni, and supporters of Haskell Indian Nations University in Lawrence, Kansas. And whereas the first edition of Haskell Institute's school newspaper, The Indian Leader, was published on March 6, 1897, the Indian Leader's content has changed greatly over the years and serves as a clear reflection of the attitudes and environment of Haskell over the decades. And whereas the year 2017 marks the 120th anniversary of the Indian Leader. Now therefore, I, Leslie Soden, Mayor of the City of Lawrence, do hereby proclaim Wednesday to be the Indian Leader Day. Thank you. There you go. It's your own paper copy. Thank you. Thank you for coming tonight, too. All right, 120 years, goodness. All right, so now we're on to our second one. We're going to recognize November 11th as Veterans Day. Are there any representatives here? Come on up to the microphone, and you all don't have to sign in, but maybe just whoever is speaking.
My name is Kim Murphy, and in March of this year, a friend of mine who works for the Veterans Administration is one of probably the finest counselors for PTSD with veterans, expressed that there were veterans among us who were disappointed that Lawrence, Kansas doesn't have a Veterans Day parade. And she contacted me and asked me if we could put one together. And so since that time, we have called together our friends from the American Legion, the VFW, and business leaders and people from all walks of life, including our veterans. And so for the first time since 1968, the last time we had a Veterans Day parade in Lawrence, Kansas, our veterans were not treated well. They were not welcomed home. They had things thrown at them and they were spit at. And now we are going to have a Veterans Day parade to welcome them home and to recognize and honor all of the families and all of the veterans who have served to protect our liberties, to thank us for what they have done, or to thank them for what they have done for us. We want to make sure that everybody knows that this isn't about politics. This is about people. It's about the folks in our community who have given so much, and we want to give back. And I want you to know that the response to this from the veterans community, at first hesitant, has been overwhelming. And we are very grateful that we have the opportunity, and that the City of Lawrence, especially Mark Teal, who worked so hard with us, has given us the opportunity to do this on Saturday, November 11th. So it's really kind of thank you Veterans Day. Almost 50 years ago was the last time we did this, and we hope to create a new tradition with positive support for our veterans and their families.
What time is that Saturday?
1 p.m.
Excellent. Is anyone else going to speak?
Anybody can speak that wants to. I think we did just fine.
Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and read the recognition then.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Whereas the nation and the free world are eternally grateful for the contributions of American veterans, men and women, to the advancement of the cause of an honorable world peace, and whereas the courage, honor, sacrifice, and dedication which veterans of the United States Armed Forces have displayed in the cause of justice, freedom, and democracy are most worthy of recognition, and whereas the Congress of the United States of America has designated the 11th day of November of each year as Veterans Day, and whereas 2017 marks the first year since 1968 that Lawrence has held a Veterans Day parade on November 11th to show gratitude for the valiant service and personal sacrifice of our veterans and their families. Now therefore, I, Leslie Soden, Mayor of the City of Lawrence, do hereby call upon all citizens of Lawrence to commend America's veterans and observe Veterans Day on November 11th with solemn pride. Thank you very much, and thank you all for your service. Hey, Kim. Hey, Kim.
Nick's a veteran.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Nick. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick.
All right, now we're on to number 3. So we're going to proclaim Friday as Celebrate Marine Corps Birthday. Do we have anyone to speak on that behalf? Come on up and tell us all about it.
Thank you, Mayor Soden, Commissioners. My name is Mike Denning. I am a retired Marine. And on November 10th, 1775, a Corps of Marines was created by the resolution of the Second Continental Congress. And since that date, many thousands men and women have borne the proud title of Marine. In memory of them, General Lejeune said that it is fitting that we who are Marines should celebrate the birthday of our Corps. And on this Friday, we're going to do just that. And your local Marines, both KU and in the city, are going to gather together at 10:30 at the Adams Alumni Center. And we will have the traditional cake cutting. We'll have rum punch. We'll recognize the oldest and the youngest Marines. And in the past, we've had World War II veterans there as well. And Senator Pat Roberts, veteran Marine, will be our guest of honor. And everything I said there is true except for the rum punch. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Well, I'll go ahead and read the proclamation here. Whereas on November 10th, 1775, the Continental Congress authorized the forming of 2 battalions of Marines. And whereas Tun Tavern, is that how you pronounce it,
That's
Tun?
correct.
Philadelphia was the first recruiting office created on that day. And whereas many Lawrence citizens and city employees have followed in the footsteps of these first recruits and other Marines by serving their country throughout the world. And whereas for many years, these former Marines have hosted a birthday celebration for the United States Marine Corps, inviting all the citizens of Lawrence and all Marines. And whereas on November 10th, 2017, the United States Marine Corps will be celebrating its 242nd anniversary, and Marines all around the world will be celebrating 242 years of honor, courage, and dedication to duty. And whereas this year's birthday celebration will be held at the Adams Alumni Center in Lawrence, Kansas at 10 a.m. on Friday, November 10th. Now therefore, I, Leslie Soden, Mayor of the City of Lawrence, do hereby proclaim Friday as Celebrate Marine Corps Birthday in Lawrence, and invite all citizens of Lawrence and Marines to join together to drink a toast to the Corps on Friday at 10 a.m. Thank you. Thank you all. And we definitely thank you all for your service.
Let me leave this here with you. I hope to see you
Sure.
there.
Okay, thank you. You can put one up by the podium as well so other people can see. Excellent. Okay, so now we're going on to the consent agenda. All matters listed below on the consent agenda are considered under one motion and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on those items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. Members of the public wishing to speak to an item that has been pulled off the consent agenda will be limited to 3 minutes for comments. Is there an item that the member of the commission wishes to remove? Is there an item that a member of the audience wishes to remove from the consent agenda? Okay, so with the addition of claims, we have 406 vendors for a total of $5,900,440.17. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Amix, seconded by Commissioner Larson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right. Just rolling right along. So now we're on to public comment. Addressing the commission. The public is allowed to speak to any items or issues that are not scheduled on the agenda after first being recognized by the mayor. Each person will be limited to 3 minutes for public comment, and we have a shot clock over there for everyone. As a general practice, the commission will not discuss, debate these items, nor will the commission make decisions on items presented during this time. Rather, they will refer the items to staff for follow-up if necessary. Individuals are asked to come to the microphone, sign in, state their name and address. Speakers should address all comments, questions to the commission. So come on up and sign in. This is for anything not on the agenda.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Katie Walsh, 732 Rhode Island. Excuse me. I wanted to thank you for giving such a rapid turnaround approval to our young friend Margot Day to do the mural in memory of the mother and daughter who were murdered and to raise awareness about domestic abuse. I wanted to do a very short compare and contrast. When Margot was painting on the wall and some other artists were helping, sunny afternoon, a police officer approached her with his hand on his weapon and said, "I've always wanted to catch somebody in the act." And apparently no one had been told that she had permission from you in the city. He called for 2 officers back up to stop the muralist. Luckily, they called City Hall and found out she wasn't tagging downtown. So I feel like we're the city of the arts. We always have a police officer here at the meeting. Perhaps there's a little disconnect between the police department and the approvals from the city commission. And I also wanted to say, those of us who've done many murals in Topeka and worked with gangs and disadvantaged kids and school groups, the cops help us find money for community murals. They come and paint on the walls. They come check to see if you're safe. They bring us snacks. I mean, it's just sort of a community policing, seeing the effect that community art around social justice issues, what it does for people in the community. So I just wanted to bring that up. Thank you.
Thank you, KT. KT, I know your birthday was last month, but I have a birthday card for you.
Thank you. I'll get it later.
Gosh darn it. Yes, you were going to say something.
I just wanted to let you know that the timer is not working, so I'm just timing it on here, so they won't be able to see it run, but I'll let you know when the time's out.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to keep trying to get it going, but I'm timing it on my laptop.
All right, so we don't have the formal time clock, but Sherry's still got it. Okay. Is there anyone else that has something for public comment, something that's not on the agenda? Okay, so we'll go on to our regular agenda. We only have one item. Addressing the commission, the public is allowed to speak to any regular agenda item or give public comment after first being recognized by the mayor. Each person will be limited to 3 minutes for public comment. Individuals are asked to come to the microphone, sign in, state their name and address. Speakers should address all comments, questions to the commission. So we weren't going to have a giant presentation on this, but you had a little update for us.
Just very brief, Mayor. We have 2 slides here that we wanted to just to recap the actions since the commission's last action for you. And let's see here. The school district and the county commission have both taken action on this since your last meeting, and both of them have voted in favor of their participation. And to give you an idea of how, at least based on the 2016 mill levies, how those rebate revenues split out, you can kind of see a chart there. The county and the school district, because they have larger mill levies than the city, are larger participants in an NRA project. And then just briefly to remind you a little bit about how the NRA works. Britt's going to talk about briefly the base and how that grows during how the NRA district affects the base and the growth in taxes.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. When this item was first heard at the public hearing, I had done a similar type of graphic, but it had all the taxing jurisdictions, had a comparison between the base value and the net new revenues of all the taxing jurisdictions put together. I've been asked to split out just the city portion, so what you're looking at now is just a comparison of the base value, or that would represent what would happen and what the city would get if the property remained undeveloped, and then the net new taxing revenues as a result of redevelopment of the project. And you can see over the 10-year time period, there is a pretty substantial difference each year. In total, over the 10-year NRA rebate period, it's a difference between about $19,000 if the property was undeveloped and $160,600 if the property was developed. If you go out a little further, $28,000 approximately for an undeveloped property site there, and $420,500 if the property was redeveloped. So that gives you a difference, gives you an idea of the difference in the net tax revenues that would be realized. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
All right. Any last questions for staff? Okay. Thank you, Britt. Well, let's go ahead and do public comment. I just want to remind everyone this is actually the second reading, and we just kind of pulled it for voting purposes. Normally, it would just be on the consent agenda, but for voting purposes, so the commissioners that voted against it can continue to do so. So is there any public comment on this item? Okay, so we'll bring it back to the commission. Are y'all ready to vote on this? We already had our long conversation last time, so.
Well, I guess I'd like to just say that it's interesting to me that if you look at the first slide, that the county and the school district have higher percentage participations, and they were in support of this project overwhelmingly. And it's also interesting to see that the city revenues will increase significantly with the project.
Any other commission discussion?
Mayor, I think this is a great project for downtown and adds, additional full-time people in the living space in downtown. I think it's a wise investment by the city, and at the same time, I respect both yous and Commissioner Herbert's comments and concerns about the project and the investment, that's being made and how it's being made. But I truly believe that this is truly a good project for downtown.
I think I would agree with Commissioner Amix that I think it is definitely a good project for downtown and Lawrence as a whole, because one thing we talk about quite often is the need to broaden that tax base, and this is one way to do that. And then we also, last winter, this commission went through a process of putting together a policy with staff on economic incentives, economic development, economic incentives. And that policy I felt was very clear, and we all agreed to that policy. And so I think it's important that we follow the process, which we did. And this project met all the policy requirements that I could read, based on what we had written up. I mean, we talked about this particular project applied for a type of incentive that didn't require job creation. It's more for dilapidated properties or vacant properties in not only downtown but also neighborhoods. It met that criteria. This project encourages business growth, which it does. It retains current businesses and encourages them to grow, which it does. It promotes redevelopment, which enhances downtown, which is a requirement, and it does. It enhances our neighborhoods and also increases sustainability of our city as a whole. This project's going to be built to LEED standards, which is important from a sustainability standpoint. As a city, we are striving to be more sustainable. This is going to increase our multimodal transportation system. It's going to use existing infrastructure, and any changes or upgrades that are needed to that infrastructure, the property owner is going to pay for those, which I think is an important thing to point out. And one thing that the applicant agreed to do was to pull his own personal residence, if he lives there, either renting or owning it, he's going to pull that off, and that will fall under that tax incentive. So he'll have to pay taxes on that, which I think is, and it was an important concession, I think, from our part. And what Britt talked about was basically the ratio of our financial gain. Our process requires that it have a 1.25%, at least a 1.25 net gain for us, and this one actually turns out to be 1.81, which is even a little bit better than what was proposed last year. So it's a net gain financially for us in what I believe to be a very big way, and I appreciate that. I know there was quite a bit of contention about the affordable housing component part of this. We had Becca Buford from the Tennis to Homeowners get up and testify that this meets our criteria for affordable housing. Nobody got up to make any statement otherwise from any of our affordable housing partners. That was a very big item for me to hear, and I reached out to our other affordable housing partners, and none of them had indicated that this does not meet our criteria. Now, we voted on all these criteria when we voted on our economic development policy. If those policies weren't good enough, then it shouldn't have been voted on in a positive manner by this commission. I believe it does meet our standards, and I think we need to continue to move forward with it. I think it's a great project, and I'm looking forward to seeing our tax base grow, because that's what's going to pay for all the programs that we want to continue to have in Lawrence. So I'm voting in favor of it.
Do you have anything that you would like to say, Commissioner Herbert? I do not either. All right, so
Mayor, I did have one question if I could. And
Sure.
We had a correspondence that came in, and there was a question about whether the condos will be leasehold or fee simple. Bob, did you have an answer for that? Sorry to bring this up this late.
I'm Bob Shum. My wife Sandra and I are the applicants for the development of Vermont Place LLC. That question came to me this morning about 10:30, and I responded by email. I don't know, maybe you didn't get a copy of that, but I responded to staff by email.
It's in there. Yeah.
It's in there, yeah.
Okay.
But let me just read the response so I get it just exactly right. With regards to the first question, will the land beneath the condos be leasehold or fee simple? That question has yet to be determined. I've stated many times that I have not done advanced legal or engineering work because to spend a large sum of money on those services before I have a project approved by the governing bodies would be foolish. The legal work is estimated to be $35,000. The engineering and architectural work is estimated to be $450,000. Rest assured that the project will follow Kansas law regarding development and sales of condos. All these condos have to be sold before the development can commence, and the buyers are going to be informed purchasers that will demand security for their investments, and hence the condo bylaws will be developed to their satisfaction. There's a second question that was put out there, and it was, what plan does the developer have to replace common element repairs? The answer is the same as number one. The Homeowners Association rules and bylaws have yet to be drawn up. Once again, these agreements must be satisfying to the new purchasers, or they won't buy a condo unit. As far as downtown becoming a Dubai-like joint, it wasn't too long ago that we fought to save downtown Lawrence from the destruction from a cornfield mall. Since then, development has helped secure it from a slide into the abyss of underutilization and deteriorating vacantness. That's my response to the proposed questions this morning. Any other questions?
That's it. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, let's do these three separately. Would someone like to make a motion on A? If they could read that out as their motion.
I make a motion to consider adopting on second and final reading ordinance number 9303, establishing a neighborhood revitalization area at 800 to 815 Vermont Street.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Larson, seconded by Commissioner Amix. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. Motion passes 3-2. Okay, would someone like to do B?
Would make a motion to authorize the city manager to execute a cooperative agreement between the city, county, and school district on the neighborhood revitalization area administration.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Amix, seconded by Vice Mayor Boley. Sorry, Vice Mayor. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. Motion passes 3-2. And the last one?
I move we authorize the city manager to execute a performance agreement between the city and the applicant.
Second.
Motion made by Vice Mayor Boley, seconded by Commissioner Larson. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. Motion passes 3-2. All right, thank you. So we're on to commission items. We have a new item here. The president of North Lawrence would like to be on the agenda in the future for what, storm update? Is this about the
This was the storm
the
that we had
ditches?
about 3 weeks ago, and the cleanup that was done, and he had been here before, and he just wants to have time on our agenda to be able to update us.
On that, is this an action item, or would it fit into a study session?
We could ask him
Yeah.
right there.
Well, that's your call.
Ted?
I mean,
Ted? We have a question here.
Ted, I have a question for you. Would you like for this to be on an agenda that would have a regular meeting, or would it fit into a study session where we could hear the update?
Whatever's convenient with the commission.
Are you looking for action like on the ditches or anything
No.
like that?
No.
Okay, I'd say a study session would be fine.
We can do it next week.
Yeah,
We can do
that'd
it
be
next
good.
week.
Okay, thank you, Ted. Any other items commission items? Okay, so we're on to city manager's report. City manager?
We probably have more items on here that'll take more time than the rest of the agenda did. The first one is an update on the accounts receivable. And recently, I attended the International City Managers Conference, and one of the sessions I attended was called "There's Something That Isn't Rotten in Denmark." And it was all about their ethics ordinance. And one of the things that their ethics ordinance talked about was admitting your mistakes and making them public. So one of the things that comes to the forefront in that regard for us and for me and ownership of those issues is this accounts receivable issue, which we keep dealing with. So I think many of you know that Douglas County pays the city a sixth of the agreed budget for carrying out the purposes and functions of the Planning Commission. When we were reviewing the 2017 revenue variances, it was discovered that the city had not yet received payment from Douglas County for 17. Our finance director, Brian Kidney, recognizing that we have had some accounts receivable issues, asked the question whether we receive payment for 15 and 16 from the county for those planning costs. It was determined that we had not. And so we approached the county, and the county immediately paid the 2017 bill. And between Casey and County Administrator Weinog, they worked out arrangements for the other 2 years to be paid. I suppose it suggests that both of us don't have very good accounting when we don't recognize that we haven't been paid and that they haven't paid us. But I'm not wishing to get into their situation. I have enough of my own to deal with. So at this point, we previously discussed there'd been a lack of documented process and procedures related to management of agreements and contracts throughout the organization, the general accounts receivable issue. As you recall, we hired an outside auditing firm, RSM, to conduct what was called a rapid assessment of the city's billing and cash application processes in April, which was presented to the commission in June. The city entered into a second contract to have RSM assist with verifying all city properties are billed appropriately, and final results are expected in December. So you'll be getting another follow-up report in December. The county share of planning expenses was not reported on any department survey. Remember, what we did is we asked all the departments to let us know what billing accounts, receivable accounts generated from their departments. So it didn't show up there, which suggests that maybe there was a problem or a flaw even in the process of trying to recount all of our agreements. Steps have since been taken now that we know that not all the county receivables were originally reported as a part of the accounts receivable audit. Staff has reviewed the master list of receivables to ensure all funding arrangements with the county are now included. A thorough review of the accounting of county revenues has also been conducted, and modifications have been made, making it easier to identify missing payments going forward. Monthly reporting on county revenues will also be more detailed beginning in 2018. Further, staff is discussing additional steps with RSM that they can take to make sure that any other outstanding items are discovered. While my confidence is better, I'm not going to say conclusively that we aren't going to catch something else, and we are going to continue to look. We also have some airport customer variance regarding the airport hangars. That's not a big financial issue. It turns out that the variances amounted to about $1,300. So we're working on those to get those straightened out. We're actually undertaking a review and appraisal of all of the T-hanger lease rates to determine the appropriateness of the current rates. Initially, our indications in surveys suggest that our rates should be higher, that we're at the lower end of what rentals are being charged for those hangars. So with the exception of the outstanding airport lease amounts, we have now collected everything that has been discovered to date to be outstanding through this audit process. Excluding the airport lease payments yet to be collected, a total of $686,037 has been collected as a result of this audit process and determining that we missed these accounts receivable. This includes the past due balance of $427,935 from the county for planning, along with $256,000 from the outstanding riverfront lease payments. Some of those are timed as well. There's a small payment of $2,000 from the Lawrence Arts Center, and then some de minimis amounts from dollar-type lease issues. So this is ongoing. I think we're down to maybe some items that will surprise us all if we miss them, but we continue to look and we continue to talk to our auditors about process to come up with ways that anything else that might have been missed.
Well, we appreciate your openness with all of that through the whole procedure.
Yeah, it's painful to all of us, but what I've told staff is, doesn't make any difference actually when it occurred. I've been here 18, 19 months. I own this. It's all going to come back to me eventually, and I have to make sure that this stuff is taken care of. But I think the best thing to do is just be transparent about it and get this out in the public and let the public know that this is what happened and this is what we're doing to correct it. So we're working on that.
Thank you.
So another big issue that we've been talking about is the farmland remediation program. And October 3rd, I updated you on the status of the city's efforts to address challenges with the remediation of the former farmland nitrogen fertilizer property. At that point, we were still concerned that nitrogenated water would need to be transported by truck from the farmland site so it could be applied to area farms. This concern was due to the volume of water that has been collected on site and an insufficient amount of land directly served by the distribution system. As you recall, we have a pipeline running under the river that takes the water across or under the river and then is distributed over farms. But over time, the farming uses on those properties have changed. We've lost some of those properties, and we don't have enough places to apply that nitrogenated water. The cost of hauling this water by truck would be approximately $40,000 per million gallons. Water's heavy, and it's expensive to move. So millions of gallons of water needed to be transported away from the site, and the cost would likely come to $400,000. In addition to the unsustainable costs associated with hauling, the operation would have a significant impact on the area environment and in infrastructure. The city has been working with KDHE to identify alternatives to truck hauling. On October 3rd, I told you that the city had just received authorization to shut down the collection pumps at the site for a 6-month period to avoid the collection of additional water in the storage system. The storage system was pretty close to maxed anyway. The city has continued to develop its land application program by working with area farmers to increase the inventory of farm land served by the distribution system, which would be, quite frankly, the most efficient way to dispose of that nitrogenated water. On October 20, the city received authorization for a one-time temporary conditional discharge of the remediation water through the existing outfall identified in farmland site. That's the NPDES permit, which is the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit that all of these end-of-pipe source types of situations have permits for. The authorization is consistent with the NPDES permit, and KDHE's conditions will mitigate any water quality degradation by restricting the amount of remediation water that can be discharged per day, establishing a minimum stream flow in the Kansas River that must be present for discharge to occur to dilute the discharge, limiting the discharge period from now until April 1st to minimize biological activity that might respond to additional nitrogen, and increase monitoring frequency of the discharge remediation water. This relief will allow for the city to investigate long-term sustainable options for remediation plan in addition to land applications. And I can't overemphasize this last comment. We appreciate KDHE's cooperation as we deal with this matter, and we will continue working with them as we study the issue and develop a plan for their review. They have been absolutely cooperative in this entire process, and Lawrence should be very appreciative of that relationship. It's good to have that kind of cooperation between a local government and a state agency, and they've really stepped up, in my opinion. So those are the comments I'd make about the farmland remediation project. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them or defer them to those that know a lot more about the chemistry of this than I do. So continuing on with staff reports, unless there's any question on that. The Municipal Equality Index is a part of the Human Rights Campaign, and they have a Municipal Equality Index, which is an annual evaluation of municipal laws, policies, and services affecting the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer community. The city has received an MEI score every year since 2013. This year, the city received a score of 74 points out of 100, and an increase of 13 points from 2016. This doesn't mean we're just focusing on one segment of the community. This should be reflective of how we deal with all issues of diversity in our community. This happens to be an index that is provided for this segment of the community, and we wish to improve not just here, but in all areas of our relationship with those less represented in the community. So I just want to point that out. We continue to look at that and see how we can improve and reach out to all segments of the community to make life better for everybody here. Next is the Social Service Funding Report. And on August 8th, 2017, the Commission directed staff to bring forward a recommendation to consolidate the Social Service Funding Advisory Board, otherwise the acronym known as SSFAB, and the Community Development Advisory Committee, CDAC. CDAC are bound by a number of additional regulations set forth through consolidated plan for the purposes of following CDBG and home program guidelines. And so the consolidated plan will have to be updated in June of 18, It is at that point that staff believes it would be most productive to bring forward a recommendation to combine the SSFAB and CDAC. While I'm sure that many of you wanted us to move a little bit faster, we think that the sequence of events works better by doing that. So you'll see that next year, June, summertime. We'll bring that back to you. The September building report, I just want to make one note about it. Staff has established performance goals of completing initial reviews for residential permits within 5 days and for commercial permits within 15 days of the application date. During 16 calendar years, staff achieved these goals for 96.5% of all residential permits with an average review time of 2.3 days and 91.6% of all commercial permits with an average review time of 7.3 days, which is highly, in my opinion, desirable for those seeking permits in the community and probably very competitive across the country in terms of our turnaround time. We hear a lot of, negative at times about how difficult we are to deal with, but that's a significant thing to be monitoring for our community because that's a really good measure of how we interact with the development community. I'm just going to have Chuck, I think, comment a little bit about the LED light issue, if you would do that for me.
So we really have two issues that I think the Commission is aware of with the LED lights. One is the temperature issue, and one is the illumination issue. We've had some discussions. We have the AMA study about the color issue, and where we're at now with the FCIP program is that's all completed. We have put in the higher temperature lights. We've worked with Westar and looked at their standards for the 4,000 Kelvin lights, and we believe that those are appropriate for street lighting. Our current policy for street lighting is at the intersections and end of cul-de-sacs. And we get just as many calls and concerns about not having enough lighting as we do having too much lighting. So it goes both ways. We met yesterday with Westar and talked for a little while about what we can do on for the other half of the street lights that they have. They have provided to me a study from the Illumination Engineering Society that kind of contradicts a little bit of what the AMA says. So, it's two different professional organizations. At this point, we're proceeding with, letting Westar go ahead with their 4,000 K lights. We can further have that discussion with Westar if the Commission thinks that that's too bright. We do look at, when we're lighting streets, basically, is some safety. Westar brought up another study that the City of Seattle had done with respect to reaction times in street lights. That study shows like a second to a second and a half delay or reduced reaction times for drivers, which kind of gets a little bit significant. So that's kind of where we're at. It's just I wanted to give you the status. We gave you all the information. One of the other issues I guess I did want to point out, we did have the graph, and I don't know if we want to spend a lot of time on it, that kind of lays out the different ranges for lighting. And you can see, obviously, the LED lights, the 3,500 to 4,500, and we're right there at the 4,000. Your televisions, your smartphones, and things of that nature, they're up into the 5,000 to 9,300 range. So it just gives kind of a relative, idea of where the lighting is within, the environment. I can answer any questions if you have any.
The other thing I would point out is that Westar has been very accommodating.
Oh, absolutely.
When we get any kind of request for shields to be placed on the windows or lights.
On the lights.
And also we are looking, and I don't know if you had this conversation with them, that you can control a bank of the LEDs so that you could actually knock down the light on that. Did you get into that conversation with them at all?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, so we're continuing to look at that. I think Westar's position to some degree is that this is the industry standard, and so they own and operate these lights, and so when you have an outage of, storm damage or something like that, that's what they stock up for, because that is the standard. But, we're, in some places, I think we would probably like the additional light. I understand people's concerns about this light, being too harsh for their actual particular environments around their house. And in those cases, if we can make the shield work or look into this other opportunity to knock out a bank of the LEDs in a particular light fixture, we will continue to pursue that. So we'll keep you informed as this moves forward. Chuck, you may want to clarify when you're talking about 3,000 K versus 4,000 K, you're not talking about brightness, you're talking about blue spectrum.
Right. Does everybody understand that? The 3,000 to 4,000 isn't necessarily the brightness, it's the color of that's what the AMA study was really about, is the color and the nocturnal habits of beings and animals as well.
Color temperature of the light.
Yeah.
Any questions for staff? Thank you, Chuck.
Okay, the next item that's on this lengthy packet was our joint city-county letter to the Kansas Corporation. I think we did receive a response. I had occasion to talk to our scientist on the city commission, Ms. Larson, and I think she was consulting with some of her science colleagues as well, and I don't know if you want to chime in on this. One of the things that Mr. McCullough suggested that we kind of pursue is include our recommendations on changing the state law in the future legislative communications to our state rep, complete research and meet with the state to understand the scope of these wells in Douglas County and surrounding counties, and determine if there's a real potential harm to Douglas County with these wells after learning much more about their number and potential harm. If there is, then the city-county should consider investing in some technical expertise on the matter to analyze future requests. There's a fairly significant burden, I think, placed on somebody that wishes to object to these things, and you probably need to have some fairly significant expertise to actually challenge the information, something that we don't possess currently on staff. Now, we could consult that out to somebody on a particular issue. And quite frankly, not all injection wells are bad, and not all injection wells cause all sorts of environmental and disastrous situations. So you really need to, drill down, so to speak, on the various issues, about each injection well. So those are some of the concerns. We didn't raise the issue, and I will be giving direction to Scott to work with the county on this issue. Most of these things are going to occur in the county, and I think the county would probably be the ones that would actually have to adopt zoning requirements as to this type of use. And I don't know if we're preempted zoning-wise from having some impact on control of where these things go or not.
That'd be part of the research we need to dive in a little bit deeper on.
So we were, this was kind of a rush. You remember that we didn't have much time on this issue. And while the staff at the state does quite a bit of, investigation and review on these things, I think the comfort level of our citizenry would be higher if in fact we were an extra set of eyes through our consultant or whoever else evaluating these issues as well. But I really see that emphasis being more towards the county than on us in terms of their protection and maybe their zoning issues or land application issues. So that's kind of where we're at with that right now.
If I could just add a couple of
Yeah,
things, if that's
please.
okay. Been working, as Tom said, with a few folks that I know on the science side of it. One of those individuals is Gil Zamansky, and he's a certified hydrologist and geologist. And he put together, I thought, was a really informative letter that was sent to the KCC in this regard. And what he looked at was the publications that are out there that show the fault lines that are known to exist in Douglas County area, northeast Kansas area. And he did find 2 fault lines. One of them is called the Warden Fault Line, which is in the vicinity of where those proposed wells are expected to be, or wanting to be drilled in. And then there's another fault line, it's an unnamed fault line that's outlined in the publications that is in Douglas County. And other thing that he pointed out, which I thought was really important, that these are known fault lines, but if you look at the research done in Oklahoma from all this background on the earthquakes that have been happening down there, most of them occur not on fault lines. And so even though we've got documentation, publications where the research has been done and we've found fault lines, that doesn't mean there's no other fault lines in that area. It just means these are the known ones. And with any science like that, especially geology, you can only look under the ground so much just based on the seismic data that you've gathered. So he did a good job, I think, of pointing out where we know they are, but also that the research is showing that just because there's not a fault line there doesn't mean that there's not going to be issues. And so that's what we have to watch out for.
I hope that you stay involved with this issue.
Yeah, I am. Thank you.
Thank you. You could be our unofficial city commission representative, assuming that you are victorious tonight.
All right. The next issue I'm going to jump to is the Lawrence Rotary Arboretum. We gained accreditation is the title of this. The City of Lawrence Rotary Arboretum has received Level 1 accreditation by the ARBNet accreditation program and the Morton Arboretum for achieving standards of professional practice for arboreta and botanic gardens. I want to acknowledge a couple different organizations and some folks. The Rotary clubs, in a collaborative effort, have been very supportive of our Rotary Arboretum. And it's not just one club, it's all the clubs here in Lawrence. I think there's at least 3 Rotary clubs, and they've been very generous in donating funds. They're currently working on a pavilion project for us, and so I know Derek Rogers, our park superintendent, is coordinating with them to get a new project developed there as well. So it's a really great collaboration between Service Club and the City Parks and Rec. The other group I wanted to identify is the accreditation application was enhanced by the recent addition of a GIS-based self-guided tour that can be accessed on the computer and mobile devices. It was built using inventory trees from the TreeWorks mapping software and a GIS database to develop the interactive storyboard. The project was completed by Hartsong Turnbull, our horticultural intern, and Micah Siebold, our GIS coordinator. So congratulations to them, and I want to give them a bit of a shout out in terms of the work that they did on that led in part to this recognition. The other thing I want to talk about just briefly is the future agendas. We have moved some items around, and those occurred just in the last few days. So on 11/21, the ordinance prohibiting open carry of firearms will be on the agenda, and then on December 5th, we're going to have a summary of the 2017 CIP and amend the 2018 CIP. We were trying to get a hold of the chamber in terms of their economic development presentation. We haven't heard back. Larry just got back from a trip to overseas, Southeast Asia. He was in Korea. He was on the DMZ line, and I'm sure right now he's back, recovering from some serious jet lag. But we'll be talking to him and maybe moving that over as well. And then the police facility site designation and the methods of construction that we propose to use for that project. Now, what's going to happen initially is we're going to recommend some ordinance changes. We're kind of confined under our current ordinances to what's referred to as a design, bid, build process. And we would like to get into what's called a design build process, which removes some risk and has shown to produce a much better product. The other thing that you're going to see from us on that night is that we're bringing some people together in terms of who is going to help us internally, besides the architect, engineers, and builder that will do this project. We're going to bring somebody out of the utilities department that has substantial construction experience to work with one of the one of the captains in the police department to coordinate the construction of this facility. But the first step is to make some ordinance changes to allow different methods of construction to occur. My experience is mainly with design, bid, build. We have ventured a little bit outside of that, but I can tell you in design, bid, build, especially when you have conflicts, you feel like everything goes like, this is the design part, this is the contractor part, and they both point fingers. And somehow the city, as the owner, gets caught in the middle trying to divine those conflicts and resolve those things. And usually the city, in my opinion, comes up a little bit short. And so there's other methods that have evolved. We spent some time, with Johnson County. Johnson County has designated people within their department that handle their construction. A couple of them that happen to be residences of Lawrence. So we invited them in to talk to the staff and talk about this process, so that we're going to roll that out at a future meeting so that you can see that there's some alternative ways of doing this, which I think will be much more productive in terms of the facilities that we will build going forward here. At least we'll have options to consider rather than just be confined to the traditional method that we've used and most places around have used. You know, it's not that it's broken, but quite frankly, it could be a lot smoother ride, so.
Tom, in that discussion, are you going to be able to show how
Yes.
the protection of the taxpayer and making sure that we're getting the best value on that by
We will-
going to
we
the
will-
design build versus the design
Yeah.
bid build?
And you know, Commissioner, it always comes down to the specific circumstances of each project. But what we'll show you is what the studies have indicated about the pros and cons. And, you know, every time you look at alternative ways of doing things, there's a plus minus that you kind of have to evaluate, and we'll show that to you. But I think with a project like this is fairly conducive to a design build kind of modification of the system that's there. That doesn't mean that you don't have a good, you know, architect on board helping you, but what it does is it pulls the architect and the construction company into the process from the very beginning. And so you can start to talk about how you can control cost, what different products are available that can be used right from the get-go. I can tell you, architects don't always know, you know, what contractors know. And contractors don't always know what architects know. So this approach pulls them both together very early on in the project, and they form a collaboration to work with the owner, in this case, the city. And I think the end product turns out better, and usually that results in some sort of cost impact to the positive for the owner.
Okay.
Tom, I really appreciate that line of thinking outside of the box, so to speak, because as a former contractor on government projects, I can tell you as a contractor, we love the design, bid, and build process, because we could pick which part we wanted to bid on, and that basically took away some of the liability, because we knew there were other partners in that, that if we built it the way they designed it, then it's on them. But if we have just a design build, then you've got to make sure that your product and that your design is true to form.
Yeah,
So-
and that is one of the big aspects that I missed, and I'm glad you brought that up. Liability burden tends to shift
Yes.
over to the design build team rather than the city.
That's right.
For flaws. So it's a very different approach. I think cities have been slow to come to it because you know, we ensconce so many things that we do in legislation that then controls, you know, maybe to more detail than it should, how we do things. And so this gets kind of that kind of bureaucratic approach out of it and tends to be much more creative.
That's good. Thank you.
Uh,
Just ask an informational question about the schedule
About the schedule of the police station?
of the events for City Commission in December.
Wait till we get to calendar.
Okay, thank you.
Under the work session, I would just tell you in November, the next meeting, we have the short-term rental ordinance and the strategic plan update scheduled, and we've just added this evening the question about the storm follow-up, okay? That Mr. Boyle had indicated a
It
desire.
says here in December, we're going to have an update on 700 New Hampshire.
Yes, that's the grocery.
Yes, the grocery.
That's the grocery
Oh, I
project.
see.
Yeah, and quite frankly, that is a project that we need to show you how it relates to your policy regarding the use of incentives, so that you can see that very clearly, and we will do that.
Maybe we could just label it a little more better
Yeah,
on this memo.
also known as AKA. Okay. That's it.
Okay, so now we're on to calendar, and KT, come on up, you had a question.
Thank you. I've got my hearing aids on high and new batteries, but I still couldn't hear you, so,
I can't get this any closer to me. And I have a little respiratory issue going on, so.
well, it's fine, but I also understood that Mr. Trainer was going to bring at least part of his design for the conference center north of 7th Street and north of the grocery store, or whatever's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I thought that was, is that third Tuesday in December?
Yeah, second.
Okay, so.
December
those-
12th? Yeah, they're both on December 12th. We got
They're on the
downtown
same
conference
day.
center and
Yeah.
the grocery
Okay.
store, it looks like.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, any calendar items that we need to add? Okay. Well, it looks like we're ready to adjourn. Anyone want to move to adjourn?
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Herbert, seconded by Commissioner Larson. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Well, good luck. 1 hour.